There's a moment in every person's life when you realize just how replaceable you are in your own family's story. For me, that moment came over roast chicken and red wine, in the middle of a dinner I didn't even want to attend. Hey Reddit. My name's Carter, I'm 33, and for most of my life, I was the other son. Not the golden child. Not the prodigy. Not the one who made the family group chat light up with congratulations every other week. That was my brother, Tyler. Tyler is 2 years younger than me and has always been the crown jewel of our family. Captain of the varsity football team, Ivy League graduate, fast-tracked through corporate promotions, and, according to my mom, God's proof that good parenting pays off. Me? I was the kid who liked taking apart radios, failed 2 college classes, and once dropped out of a master's program because it didn't feel right. I've heard every variation of "you'll figure it out eventually" more times than I can count, usually followed by a sigh or a pointed glance toward Tyler. Even when I bought my first condo at 27, no help, no loans, it was met with a "that's great, Carter. So when are you going to go back to school?" I should clarify, I'm not bitter about Tyler's success. I don't hate him, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't carry around a growing ball of resentment after 3 decades of being invisible unless I was screwing something up. The truth is, I wasn't just figuring life out like they all assumed. I just never told them what I was really doing, because every time I tried, someone would interrupt me mid-sentence to ask about Tyler's latest race. So I stopped trying, and I started building. But we'll get there. It started a few months ago when my parents decided to throw a big family dinner to celebrate Tyler's newest promotion, senior vice president at some mid-sized logistics company. I wasn't surprised. The man could sneeze at work and HR would send him flowers. I didn't want to go. I knew exactly how it would play out. Mom's 3-course meal, Dad's Scotch breath recounting stories of Tyler's Little League days like they were warm memories, my aunt drunk crying about how proud she was of him, and me, sitting quietly at the end of the table, nursing a drink and pretending I wasn't tired of being background noise. But I went, because I always go. I pulled into my parents' driveway around 6:45, a little late on purpose. Their house hadn't changed in years, same blue siding, same ceramic angel by the porch steps, same wreath on the door that said, "Family is everything," like some kind of cosmic joke. Inside, the house buzzed with voices and clinking glasses. My mom greeted me with a distracted hug, already glancing over her shoulder to make sure the roast wasn't burning. Tyler was standing near the fireplace with a whiskey in hand, surrounded by a group of uncles and second cousins, all grinning like they'd just spotted a celebrity. "Carter, you made it," he called, genuinely happy to see me. And see, that's the thing about Tyler. He's not a bad guy. He's smart, charming, respectful. He never gloated or rubbed my face in anything. But somehow, that made it worse. Because he didn't have to. Everyone else did it for him. Dinner started around 7:30. We all sat around the massive oak table, the one my parents only used for holidays or events deemed important enough to make me wear a collared shirt. The place was set with the good china. There were name cards, for God's sake. Tyler, of course, sat at Dad's right hand. I was 3 seats down on the left, next to Cousin Maddie, who kept texting under the table. The food was great. Mom always went all out. I sipped my wine and tried to tune out the conversation, nodding politely while people went on about quarterly bonuses and stock options I didn't ask about. Then, halfway through the main course, Dad cleared his throat. "Ahem. Everyone, if I could just have your attention for a moment." The room quieted. "I just want to take a second to say how incredibly proud I am of my son Tyler." He clapped Tyler on the back. Promoted to senior VP at only 31. That's not just success, that's leadership. That's legacy. Everyone clapped. Glasses clinked. My mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin. "He's always been driven," Dad continued. "Remember when he built that model airplane in the 8th grade? I told you then. He was going places." I almost laughed. Tyler didn't build that plane. I did. He painted it. But whatever. It didn't matter. "And now," Dad said, raising his glass, "he's not just working at the company, he's shaping it, helping it grow, moving it forward." I smiled tightly and took another sip of wine. My hands were shaking a little. Not from anger, just exhaustion. The kind you feel when you've been holding in 1,000 words for a decade. And the best part? Dad grinned. His CEO said he's on track for even more. Said he's one of the smartest people they've hired in years. Isn't that right, Tyler? Tyler chuckled modestly. I guess so. That's what she told me. I put my glass down. Slowly. Deliberately. Funny, I thought. That she he was referring to? That CEO? Yeah, that would be me. I hadn't told them. Not once. Not even a hint. They knew I ran a small business, but never asked for details. I started the logistics company 6 years ago with a silent partner and a whole lot of sleepless nights. After 3 years of grinding, we merged with a mid-tier player in the field, and I became the largest shareholder. Last year, I bought out the co-founder and stepped in as acting CEO. And yes, Tyler had been working there for nearly 2 years. Applied through standard channels. Got the job on his own merits, ironically. He didn't even know I owned it. I kept it that way for a reason. But that night, something shifted. It was the way Dad said legacy. Like it belonged to Tyler. Like the rest of us were just extras in his heroic tale. Like I hadn't spent years sacrificing vacations, weekends, and peace of mind to build something from nothing. Something that now had over 150 employees and contracts across 3 states. Something my own brother now helped manage. I looked around the table. Everyone was nodding, smiling, raising glasses. And I felt it again. That slow, choking sensation of being erased while sitting right there. So I smiled. I didn't say it then. Not yet. That would have been too easy. Instead, I let the silence hum for a second too long. Just enough to make my dad glance at me, eyebrow raised. You've been awfully quiet, Carter, he said, voice light but pointed. Still figuring life out. The words landed like a slap. The old joke. The same one they'd used at Thanksgiving, at my cousin's wedding, at the last barbecue when I showed up late from a business trip and they assumed I'd been job hunting. Everyone chuckled. Even Tyler winced a little. And I just smiled. Because that was the moment I knew. The moment I decided I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. Not at the next dinner. Not the next time they talked about legacy. Not the next time someone clapped Tyler on the back for a company he didn't even know I owned. No, the next time, I'd speak. And when I did, I'd make sure they'd remember it. But before that moment came, something else happened. Something I hadn't expected. And it started just 3 days later, with an email Tyler was never supposed to see. And that's when everything began to unravel. I didn't sleep much after that dinner. It wasn't the food, or the wine, or the awkward half-hugs when people left. It was that look Dad gave me when he said, still figuring life out. It stuck with me, like a splinter under the skin. Not painful at first, but irritating, constant, something you can't stop touching. And the worst part? That wasn't even the first time he'd said it. He said it when I turned 30 and didn't want to party. Said it when I told them I was working on something big, and they laughed like it was a phase. He even said it when I bought a new car, paid in full, and he muttered, must have gotten a good deal, huh? It's weird how your own family can clip your wings while smiling at the dinner table. For the next few days, I buried myself in work. I had meetings to prep for, quarterly reports to approve, and a new distribution hub in Kentucky that needed final sign-off. Normally, I love the chaos. But that week, it all felt heavier, like I was dragging chains behind me. Then, on Thursday morning, Tyler forwarded an internal email to our company group chat. Tyler Harrison. Hey team, anyone know who this C. Monroe is CC'd on these board updates? I don't think I've met them, but their name keeps popping up. I froze when I saw it. C. Monroe was me. Carter Monroe. It was the name I used in our private equity documents, the one listed under CEO on our confidential board-facing reports. On purpose, I kept it separate from the public team org chart. To everyone else, the face of the company was Alex and Gwen, our public-facing COO, and a damn good one. I never thought Tyler would go poking around in board updates. Honestly, I didn't think he cared enough to notice. But he did now. Before I could even draft a response, someone replied in the chat. Sasha, legal, that's the CEO. I thought you already met him. Tyler's next message was quick. Tyler Harrison. Wait. Carter. A pause. Sasha, yes. I stared at the screen. My phone buzzed. It was Tyler. I let it ring. A minute later, a text. Tyler, is this real? And then another. Tyler, you're the CEO? I didn't answer. I needed time to think. Not because I was scared, but because I could already hear the storm gathering. It only took 6 hours for the news to hit the rest of my family. At 8:07 p.m., my mother called. Why didn't you tell us? She asked, voice trembling, not with awe, but with something closer to accusation. Because you never asked, I replied. She sputtered. That's ridiculous. Of course we Carter, this isn't some little side hustle. You're running a company. Your brother works for you. Yeah, and he earned that job. I didn't hand it to him. That's not the point, she snapped. We had a right to know. You had a right? I laughed softly. Since when did I owe you my resume? You don't have to be sarcastic. Your father's going to be very disappointed. Ah, there it was. Disappointed. Not proud. Not surprised. Not even curious. Just disappointed. The next day, Dad called. I didn't pick up. Then came the emails. The family group chat lit up like it hadn't in years. Only now, I was the topic. Uncle Ray. Damn, Carter, you've been holding out on us. Aunt Liz. So proud of you, sweetie. But why the secrecy? Mom, we'll talk about this Sunday. Don't be late. Dad, need to understand what this means. We need clarity. We need clarity. Like I was a boardroom risk instead of a son. Tyler, though, he didn't say anything. Not until Sunday. That's when it broke. We were all back at my parents' place, because of course we were. Mom couldn't not host a Sunday dinner, even in the middle of a Category 5 family hurricane. I showed up last again. On purpose. They were already seated, Tyler on the far side of the table, arms crossed, jaw clenched. My mom handed me a plate of roast beef like nothing had happened. My dad looked like he'd aged 5 years in 4 days. No one said anything for a while. We just chewed. Finally, Tyler put down his fork. So, he said, looking directly at me. You're my boss. The words hit like a slap. I kept my tone calm. Technically, no. I don't micromanage the sales department. But you own the company, he said, sharper this time. You signed my promotion. No, I corrected him. I didn't. Your regional VP and our HR director did. I didn't even know about it until afterward. He scoffed. Sure. My dad leaned forward. Carter, why keep it a secret? From your own family? I looked at all of them. Mom with her tightly pursed lips, Dad with his furrowed brow, Tyler practically vibrating across the table, and I felt something shift inside me. Like something had finally snapped loose. Because you never saw me, I said quietly. Not really. You saw failure. Or confusion. Or disappointment. You never asked what I was building. You just assumed I wasn't building anything worth talking about. That's not fair, Mom said. It is, I said. It's exactly fair. Tyler spoke again, voice rising. You know what this looks like, right? Like you played us. Like you let me grovel for that promotion while you sat on top and watched. I didn't know you were applying for it, I said firmly. I'm not in your chain of command, Tyler. And I never treated you differently. I made sure of it. But you could have, he said bitterly. You could have crushed my chances. Or fast-tracked me. Either way, you had the power. And I didn't use it, I said. Because I didn't want you to feel like I got you where you are. I respected you too much for that. He pushed his chair back. Well, thanks for the respect, I guess. Then he left. Just like that. Dinner kind of fizzled after that. My dad muttered something about timing and honesty while stabbing his green beans. My mom cleared plates with more force than necessary. I stayed until dessert, then left without saying goodbye. I wish that had been the worst of it. But 3 days later, I got an email from HR. Tyler had filed a formal complaint against me. Alleged undisclosed conflicts of interest, favoritism, and nepotistic hiring practices. He cited emails I'd sent him, basic logistical stuff, nothing personal, as examples of manipulative influence. Said it created a hostile dynamic that undermined his professional integrity. I sat at my desk staring at the complaint for a long time. I didn't feel angry. I felt hollow. This wasn't just petty sibling rivalry anymore. This was a betrayal. Cold. Calculated. Weaponized through the very company I'd built to escape that kind of family chaos. I called our legal team. They said they'd handle it. But the message was clear. Tyler didn't just want distance. He wanted blood. He wanted to hurt me. And it worked, at least for a while. I started second-guessing myself, wondering if I'd done something to cause this. If maybe keeping the secret had been cruel. If maybe I'd underestimated just how deep the favoritism had rooted itself, not just in our parents, but in him. Then came the worst blow. A week later, I was pulled into a board meeting. Not unusual. What was unusual were the 2 items at the top of the agenda: CEO conflict of interest disclosure and leadership confidence vote. Apparently, someone had reached out to 2 of our external board members and forwarded them Tyler's complaint. And just like that, the company I had built, the one I had bled for, was now holding a vote on whether I was fit to lead it. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Because I knew. This wasn't just about a company. This was about legacy. This was about a brother so used to being the pride of the family that he couldn't stomach the idea that I had built something bigger, something real, without him. And now, he was trying to burn it all down. But what he didn't realize was that I'd been underestimated my entire life. And I'd learned exactly how to turn that into a weapon. So when I walked into that boardroom, I had a plan. One that would take everything Tyler thought he knew and flip it upside down. One that would expose not just his lies, but the foundation they stood on. And one that would make sure the next family dinner would never be the same again. I didn't walk into that boardroom to fight. Not at first. I walked in wearing a navy blue blazer, no tie, and a look I'd practiced in the mirror for 2 hours the night before. Calm, collected, empty of rage, but full of resolve. If you looked closely, you might have noticed the fine tremble in my hands. But no one looked closely. No one ever had. The board members were already seated when I arrived. 8 people, 2 on Zoom, 6 in person. Some of them had been with me from the beginning. Others were newer, brought in after the merger. Investors, lawyers, advisors. All sharp. All watching me now with that unreadable corporate gaze. The chair, a woman named Pamela who'd always backed me before, gave a polite nod. Carter, thanks for coming. I nodded back. Of course. We got through the legal formalities quickly. Roll call, disclosure of voting members, acknowledgement of the complaint. Pamela looked at me. Before we proceed to deliberation, would you like to respond? I stood, straightened my jacket, took a breath I didn't know I was holding. Yes, I would. I didn't have slides. I didn't have graphs. What I had was the truth. And I told it. I told them how I'd started the company 6 years ago from a studio apartment, eating frozen burritos and cold brew while emailing prospective clients until 3 a.m. How I went 2 years without a paycheck. How I landed our first warehouse contract by driving across the state myself, in a borrowed car, and presenting a logistics model I designed on the back of a pizza box. How I'd grown the company from 3 employees to 154, negotiated a merger, kept us profitable through a pandemic, and retained 91% of our staff during a volatile market year. I told them I'd made mistakes, but none of them unethical. That I'd kept my name out of the org chart on purpose to avoid influencing internal decisions. That Tyler had applied like anyone else. That I'd recused myself from every panel or promotion vote involving him. I didn't want to be a brother, I said, looking directly at the Zoom camera. I wanted to be a builder. And I wanted every person here to know they earned their place, including Tyler. Silence. I finished with one last sentence. If the mistake I made was staying quiet while I worked, then I'll own that. But I will not apologize for what I built. Pamela stared at me for a long moment. Then she nodded once. The board deliberated for 37 minutes. I waited in the hallway with a paper cup of stale coffee and a mind racing with every version of failure I could imagine. When they called me back in, I stood tall, prepared for anything. Pamela smiled, barely. The vote is 7-1. You retain your position. Relief didn't hit me like a wave. It trickled in slowly, like sunlight through blinds. I nodded, thanked them, and left. But the damage was done. Tyler didn't show up to work the next day, or the day after that. On Friday, HR informed me he'd submitted a formal resignation, effective immediately. No explanation. No goodbye. Just an auto-generated exit form and a company laptop left in the mailroom. I stared at the email for a long time. Not because I missed him, but because I didn't. And that broke something inside me more than I expected. Because as much as I'd resented him, as much as he'd tried to tear me down, I'd wanted to fix things. Somewhere deep down, I'd hoped this could have been the turning point. A reset. A moment to see each other not as rivals or opposites, but as men who could finally stand on even ground. But Tyler didn't want that. He wanted the pedestal. And if he couldn't have it, he'd rather burn the whole house down. I went home that night and sat in the dark for a long time. No music, no TV, just the hum of the fridge and the occasional car outside. For the first time in years, I didn't know what came next. The company was safe, but I wasn't. Something had shifted in me, something permanent. Like I'd finally looked in the mirror and seen every scar, every ignored milestone, every time someone cut me off mid-sentence to ask about Tyler, and realized I'd let it all happen. I'd accepted being invisible. And now, I had to figure out who I was when I wasn't. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I kept my head down at work, focused on operations, got lunch with my department heads, visited our warehouses, spoke at a logistics conference in Seattle, and was approached afterward by a kid with a notebook full of questions. He said he wanted to be like me someday. I didn't know what to say. I smiled, signed his notebook, told him to stay curious. But something inside me still felt off. At home, I started therapy. First session, I walked in with arms crossed, ready to talk about work stress. By the third session, I was talking about Tyler, about my dad, about the Christmas where I got a used iPod and Tyler got a new laptop, and how I told myself I didn't care. About the college graduation where Dad took photos with Tyler for 30 minutes and forgot to take a single one with me. About how I'd never once heard my father say, "I'm proud of you." The therapist just listened, then asked, "Have you ever said it to yourself?" I didn't answer, but that question haunted me for days. I started taking weekends off. For the first time in 6 years, I rested. Not just physically, but mentally. I read novels, cooked pasta from scratch, drove with the windows down and no destination in mind. I took a pottery class, of all things, and made a mug that cracked in the kiln but still held water. It felt like something symbolic. I also started saying no to meetings that didn't need me, to investors who wanted to micromanage, to family invites that came packaged in obligation. When my mother texted, "Family barbecue this Saturday. Everyone's coming. Don't be late," I stared at the screen for 5 minutes. Then I wrote, "Thanks, but I've got other plans. Maybe next time." She sent a thumbs up emoji. That was it. I didn't feel guilty. For once, I felt free. But the biggest shift came 2 months later, on a random Tuesday. I was at the office, finalizing a new warehouse lease, when Sasha from legal knocked on my door. "There's someone here to see you," she said, eyes uncertain. "Family." I frowned. "Mom." She shook her head. "Tyler." I stood up before I knew why. He was in the lobby, wearing jeans and a jacket I hadn't seen before. His face looked thinner, eyes tired. He smiled when he saw me, but it was tentative, like someone approaching a skittish dog. "Hey," he said. "Hey, can we talk?" I led him into an empty conference room. He sat. I didn't. He looked up at me. "I'm sorry." I waited. "No point jumping in now." "I was angry," he said. "And hurt. And jealous, I guess." He laughed bitterly. "Not that I have a right to be. You built something amazing, and I tried to turn it against you. That's messed up." I crossed my arms. "Why?" He shrugged. "Because I didn't know who I was without being the guy who's doing better than his brother." He looked at the table. I told myself I worked hard, that I earned everything. But deep down, I always knew the road was easier because of how people saw me, because of how they saw you. Silence. "I thought if I made you look smaller, I'd feel taller," he said quietly. But all I did was prove how small I was. I didn't say anything. "Not yet. I'm not asking for a job. Or forgiveness," he added. I needed you to hear it from me, before you heard it from someone else." I finally sat. "Why now?" I asked. He exhaled. "Because I've been doing what you did. Building something. From scratch. No handouts. It sucks." He smiled. "But it's also good. In a way. I get it now. Why you kept it quiet. Why it mattered." He looked at me. I'm not the only one who changed after that dinner. I stared at him for a long moment. Then I nodded. Just once. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just sat there, in the silence, as two brothers who had finally taken off the masks. That was the first day we started rebuilding. Not as golden boy and black sheep. Not as CEO and complaint. But as equals. As men. The dinner table had changed. But so had I. And I had no intention of ever going back to being unseen. But what none of us knew, what was still on the horizon, was that our parents had plans of their own. And the next move they made would test everything I thought I'd rebuilt. The thing about rebuilding is, it's not always clean. Some parts heal smoothly, sure. Like talking to Tyler again. That didn't fix everything overnight. But we'd finally gotten past the part where we saw each other as competition. We met for coffee twice that month. No tension. No scorekeeping. We talked about work, about life. I found out he'd been consulting for a startup in Denver. He didn't mention our parents once. That should have tipped me off. Because 2 weeks after our second coffee, my mom called. Not to catch up. Not to ask how I was doing. She was calling with an announcement. "We've decided to make some changes to the will," she said. I blinked. "Okay. We just want everything to be fair, Carter. You understand, right?" That's how she phrased it. Like a warning dressed up as diplomacy. I sat down at my kitchen counter, suddenly cold all over. "What kind of changes?" "Well," she said, her voice shifting into that mom explaining we can't have the toy tone. Since Tyler is taking a bit of a step back professionally, and you're obviously doing very well, we thought it might make sense for you to take less from the estate. You don't need it the way he does. I didn't speak for a moment. Then I asked, did Tyler ask you to do this? No. He doesn't even know yet. She laughed lightly, like this was all so reasonable. But come on, Carter. You're the CEO of a company. You're set for life. I felt my jaw tighten. And the house? I asked, already knowing. Silence. Then, well, yes. We're putting Tyler on the deed now, just in case anything happens. You know how paperwork can get messy. I stared at the wall. I could hear my dad in the background, fiddling with something in the garage. Probably the same workbench he'd built for Tyler in high school. The same one I wasn't allowed to touch. Let me get this straight, I said, keeping my voice steady. You're giving Tyler the house. And a bigger share of the estate. Because I'm doing better. It's not about taking anything from you, she said. It's about helping your brother. The irony stung. They hadn't lifted a finger to help me when I was living on microwave noodles and pitching investors from a folding chair in a rental closet. But now that I was stable, thriving even, they wanted to balance the scales. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I just said, I think you should talk to a lawyer before you do anything. And then I hung up. For a moment, I thought that would be the end of it. Maybe a scare. Maybe enough to make them pause. It wasn't. The following week, I got a notice from the county clerk's office. The deed transfer had gone through. Tyler's name was now co-listed on my childhood home. The same home I had helped repair after a storm when I was 23. The one I had helped refinance when they were struggling during the recession. The one I'd offered to buy outright when they flirted with foreclosure. They never accepted that offer. Said it would be weird if their unemployed son owned the house. And now that I owned a multi-million-dollar business, they handed it to my brother. No conversation. No warning. Just a legal document with a notary seal and the last name Harrison, right where mine used to be. That was when something in me snapped. Not in a dramatic, table-flipping way. Not even in anger. Just a quiet, internal shift. A realization. I was done trying to prove anything. They had made their choice. Again. But this time, I had something they didn't expect. Power. Not just money or influence, but leverage. The kind you only get after years of being underestimated. After being ignored, written off, talked over. I started making calls that night. The first one was to my lawyer, Madison. She'd helped me structure the company during the merger. She was sharp, discreet, and had an excellent memory. I told her I wanted to set up a private holding company. Something quiet. Separate from my name. The kind of entity that didn't draw attention, but had full purchasing power. She didn't ask why. She just got to work. The second call was to a friend from college, Amir. We'd reconnected at a tech conference a year ago. What my parents didn't know, because they never asked, was that Amir ran a boutique real estate fund. He also happened to specialize in acquiring distressed properties from aging homeowners who needed liquidity but didn't want to downsize. Off-market deals? He asked. Exactly, I said. I want everything quiet. No public listings. No family names on paperwork. You planning to flip? I smiled faintly. Not exactly. I spent the next 6 weeks laying the groundwork. I acquired 3 properties in the same neighborhood as my parents' house. 2 rental homes and 1 vacant lot 2 doors down. All purchased under my new holding company. No one knew it was me. I paid in cash, closed fast, and kept the original tenants with small rent reductions. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I just wanted proximity. Leverage. Meanwhile, I asked Madison to prepare an asset purchase agreement for a very specific, very sentimental property my parents owned, a lake cabin they inherited from my grandfather. They never used it. I had spent one summer there as a kid. Tyler didn't like it. Too many bugs, no internet. But I remembered the creaky dock and the quiet mornings. It was one of the only places I remembered feeling at peace as a child. I made an offer through a shell buyer. Well above market value. They accepted in 3 days. They never asked who bought it. A week later, I had a renovation team on site replacing the roof, fixing the deck, and installing solar panels. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was reclamation. A few weeks later, Tyler texted me. Tyler, did you buy the cabin? Me. Why do you ask? Tyler, because mom's freaking out. Said someone bought it from under them. Offered 3x what it's worth. Me, huh? Must have really wanted it. He didn't press. Not then. Meanwhile, my parents kept sending family group texts, birthday reminders, pictures of their garden, a link to an article Dad wrote for his church newsletter, where he described Tyler as the heart and future of our family. I didn't respond, but I kept watching. I found out my parents had taken out a small line of credit against the house, my house, the one Tyler now partially owned. I found out Tyler had moved in temporarily while figuring things out, according to my cousin Rachel. I found out my dad had been telling neighbors he planned to renovate the garage into an in-law suite to help Tyler get back on his feet. None of them knew that the company I built, the one I'd nearly lost because of that same brother, had doubled in valuation since the board vote. We were expanding again. National contracts, warehouse hubs in 3 new states. And I had an opportunity, one I hadn't planned for. A large-scale logistics client, huge, national, steady, needed a custom warehouse facility in our hometown, close to major interstates, easy truck access, and they were willing to sign a multi-year lease if we could break ground before winter. I knew the perfect lot, the vacant one 2 doors down from my parents, the one I already owned. So I started planning. The city needed to approve zoning. The neighborhood needed to be informed. Public notices would go out. There'd be flyers, meetings, and if all went according to plan, I'd be developing a 200,000 square foot facility within shouting distance of my childhood front porch. No one would know it was mine until it was too late. But even that wasn't the end game. That was just the signal. The real move, the real setup, was what I'd found in the fine print of the deed transfer between my parents and Tyler. A clause, very deep but legally binding. And it gave me the opening I'd been waiting for. Not just to confront them, but to take back everything they thought they could hand away behind closed doors. Because they'd made one mistake. They forgot who they were dealing with. Not the black sheep. Not the disappointment. Not the kid still figuring life out. No, they were dealing with the man who built an empire while they weren't watching. And now, I was watching them. And I was done being polite. The zoning meeting was scheduled for 6 p.m. at the local community center, same beige building where I'd once failed a 5th grade science fair because my baking soda volcano tipped over. Funny how things come full circle. The week before, the city mailed out those generic white notices. Community notice of proposed commercial development. Neighbors started murmuring. A few even showed up at the property to read the temporary signs staked in the ground. One of them, Mr. Bergman, used to mow our lawn back when I was 12. He took a photo of the rendering on the flyer and posted it in the neighborhood Facebook group. That's when it reached my parents. And more importantly, Tyler. At 9:17 that night, I got a text from my brother. Tyler, tell me you're not building a warehouse 2 doors down from Mom and Dad. Me, you sure you want to know the answer? Tyler, Carter, what the hell is this? Me, business. He didn't reply after that. But the next morning, I got a call from my mother. I let it go to voicemail. Then I got one from my father. Then my aunt. Then my mother again. Finally, I picked up on the 3rd call from a number I didn't recognize. Carter Monroe, I answered. My mom's voice snapped back. Don't you dare pretend you don't know who this is. Wasn't pretending. Just wasn't sure which member of the family was calling to yell at me next. She ignored that. How could you do this? You're going to destroy our home. That lot is part of our neighborhood. You think a warehouse belongs here. I kept my voice flat. Funny. You didn't seem to care much about what belonged to me when you handed the house to Tyler without telling me. That's different. No, I said. It's really not. She faltered. This isn't about punishment, I continued. It's business. The city's desperate for jobs. The logistics partner is legitimate. It'll bring in new tax revenue, contracts, and infrastructure upgrades. Don't give me that politician answer, she hissed. You're doing this to make a point. I already made my point, I said. Now I'm just building what I need to build. She hung up. But I wasn't done. Because here's where it all came together. The clause I'd found, buried in the deed transfer between my parents and Tyler, was simple but legally powerful. In exchange for Tyler being added to the title, he agreed to assume partial liability for all property-related debts, liens, and encumbrances attached to the estate. When my parents took out that line of credit against the house, it triggered a contingency. If the lien holder demanded repayment or refinance, both title holders, including Tyler, would be held jointly responsible. And that's exactly what I did next. I bought the debt. Quietly. Legally. Through a shell company. Then, through counsel, I notified Tyler and my parents that the credit line was being called in. Full repayment due in 45 days, or foreclosure proceedings would begin. Panic set in immediately. Tyler called again, this time less furious and more cornered. Carter, he said, you can't do this. I already did. They don't have that kind of money. Then maybe they shouldn't have taken out a loan on a house they planned to give away, I said. Maybe you shouldn't have signed a document you didn't read. You're trying to make them homeless? No, I said. I'm trying to make a point you all finally have to listen to. By bankrupting your own family. I paused. By showing them what it feels like to be treated like a variable. Like a liability. Like someone who doesn't count because they're doing fine on their own. He went quiet. I added, I'm not taking the house. I'm offering a buyout. Below market value. Cash. Enough for them to relocate, pay off their debts, and have something left over. And if they don't accept, then the foreclosure moves forward. Legally. Publicly. And you, as co-owner, will have to explain why your name's on it. Tyler didn't speak for nearly a full minute. Then he said, you've changed. No, I said. I've just stopped hiding. The next 2 weeks were chaos behind the scenes. Meetings. Legal paperwork. My parents hired a lawyer, who quickly confirmed the clause was airtight. Tyler tried to contest the debt transfer, but the documents were clean. Every I dotted. Every T crossed. In the end, they took the buyout. They moved to a smaller place about 30 minutes away, a gated community with beige houses, manicured lawns,